Are globalist governments worldwide and big tech giants collaborating in order to shut down free speech and independent media and to create a totally curated sphere of reality in which dissent will be almost impossible? The answer is... Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us and supporting us on our increasing voyage towards freedom and inevitable mutual awakening together. It's so important that you join us. You know that now. Click the red button and join us. Become an awakened wonder if it's within your means, and follow us where you can follow free speech, because it's going to become increasingly difficult, and the timing of recent events couldn't be more peculiar and informative if you're willing to look at the facts objectively. For example, in the UK, a new online safety bill has been introduced that makes it essentially impossible for big tech platforms to encourage, house, and indeed permit and facilitate voices that contradict the official narrative on a whole range of subjects, including but not limited to health and pandemics, war and military-industrial complex matters, mainstream media and legacy media narratives, and essentially the corporate agenda of the state. You can add almost infinitely to this list because that's what the bill allows to happen. Essentially, the idea of conversation and discourse is being shut down, curated, controlled. Now remember, in the pandemic period, at the very beginning, there were legitimate voices from well-seasoned experts who were saying things like, oh, is this going to be safe? And what are the consequences of this? And what about this particular measure or this lockdown or this? That kind of conversation was happening. Many of the things that were being discussed, one example being just natural immunity or the Wuhan lab leak theory, were censored at the beginning because of existing collaborations between the state and big tech in your country, in my country, in countries across the world. That's what globalism means. The ability to facilitate a ubiquitous global agenda without democracy. There won't be a variety of results, as would happen in a democracy, because people would have all different perspectives, opinions, needs, requirements, cultures, etc. You would see the opposite of hegemony. Hegemony is now being legislated for in the UK, but it's not limited to that. Ireland is introducing a law that's yet more draconian. Every one of the Five Eyes countries, that's the term used by Edward Snowden to describe Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, the Anglophonic countries, they collaborate and share each other's data in order to bypass spying restrictions in their own native land. Each of them are introducing online laws that make it difficult for us to communicate openly. Now, as is always the case, these laws are facilitated using things that any sane person would agree with, like, hate speech. No one wants hate speech, do they? Absolutely not. No one wants exploitation of children. No one wants violence or the exploitation. Of course, that's just standard. Everybody agrees with that. Everybody believes in that, and that's why those ideas are used to usher forward and through measures that will ultimately lead to the inhibition and prohibition of free speech and opposition and dissent. Just ask yourself this question: is there a reason that you don't trust the government? Is there a reason you don't trust the legacy media? Is that reason because you don't think they have your best interests at heart when it comes to pandemics, when it comes to wars, when it comes to the way they report on any story, when it comes to the way they govern, the way they spend your taxpayer dollars, pounds, or whatever currency is relevant in your nation? Do you trust them anymore? Are you beginning to detest and despise them? Is there a reason for that? And is that reason fundamentally that you cannot trust them because they do not tell you the truth and they do not operate on your behalf? They are operating according to a different agenda. This is not conspiracy theory. These are facts that we're going to discuss with you right now. Let us know what you think about that in the chat, and thank you for joining us again. And if you want to become a member of our community, we need you now more than ever before. Let's get into the facts of this particular story. The free speech website, and free speech is in inverted commas, free speech, because over the last few years, terms like disinformation have been introduced. Oh, look at this disinformation. What if people don't treat their medical conditions correctly because of this disinformation? Yeah, is it that? Or is it that you are tacitly, and in some cases explicitly, supporting a big pharma agenda because they are, in fact, your biggest advertisers, because they are significant donors? Just note what is being regarded as disinformation and you'll work it out for yourselves, obviously. The free speech website that hosts Russell Brand could be forced out of the UK under new online safety laws, experts have said. Under the online safety bill, which is due to become law next month, Rumble will be regulated by Ofcom because it's accessible in the UK. Under the new law, Rumble will have to prevent children from seeing pornography and material that promotes self-harm, suicide or eating disorders. Violent content and material harmful to health, such as vaccine misinformation, will also have to be kept from children. Look at how this paragraph uses a literal hypnosis technique. You can look it up for yourselves. Verifiable, verifiable, suggestion. In short, some information is given, like you are sitting on a chair, you can feel air on your face, you think that you're a chicken now. Have a look at that technique in this paragraph. Under the new law, Rumble will have to prevent children from seeing pornography. Well, that's good. Material that promotes self-harm, thankfully. Suicide or eating disorders, obviously. Violent content, yes, of course. Material harmful to health, yeah, good, still good. Such as vaccine misinformation. So suddenly we've gone from black and white, areas where we would all agree, to a grey area. What is vaccine misinformation? Is it misinformation that there are cases of myocarditis? Is it misinformation that some of the booster shots have only been tested on 8 mouses? What is misinformation? This is precisely the area where misinformation is information that they would prefer you not to have. Just ask the question again. Do you believe that the state and big tech have as their absolute priority your well-being and your welfare? Non-cooperation could leave Rumble executives open to arrest if they came to Britain, as the bill provides for senior managers to be held criminally liable. So do you see now that what the state are doing is co-opting a once private space that obviously, as the Twitter files revealed, was being controlled and curated to prevent certain information being amplified, promoted, or even in some cases seen? They've gone from doing that covertly to enshrining it in law. That these platforms, aside from the biases that may exist within them, have the potential to facilitate absolutely open communication. That's what free speech platforms do at their best. Platforms like X and platforms like Rumble facilitate the possibility for open communication and for us to be able to make decisions for ourselves. This paternal attitude, this idea that we must be protected, that we should be protected, that we can be protected, that we're going to be protected whether we like it or not, is being used to legitimize censorship and control. And remember, keep at the forefront of your mind, do you trust the government? Do you trust the media? Professor Lorna Woods, an internet law expert who was one of the architects of the bill, said Ofcom had the ability to disrupt or block Rumble if it did not comply. An Ofcom spokesman said, Ofcom is preparing to regulate online safety by ensuring that tech companies have effective measures in place to protect their users, particularly children. Now, plainly, what your government and my government claim is these bills that are being oddly coordinated in concert across the world are about protecting children. That's what it literally says here. But let me ask you this. If your government's primary concern was the protection and welfare of children, would they be targeting online free speech platforms like Rumble and other places where free speech is possible? Or would they be looking at big food and their agenda to fill us up with processed food that plainly introduces diabetes, heart disease, cancer? Would they be attempting to regulate the type of food that's available in schools? Would they be looking to ensure that children have healthy diets, have access to good, healthy food? Do you notice that the government aren't saying, we've got this new bill where we're going to regulate big food, or we've got this new bill where we're going to regulate big pharma and ensure that certain drugs aren't promoted? We're going to introduce this new bill to ensure that children have access to nutrition, to good education. Of course, phatic and empty promises are made in all of those areas, but this is where we're seeing legislation that enables control. It facilitates control, not welfare. As well as establishing these standards, we will engage regularly with services to understand what they're doing to protect their users and push them to make improvements where needed. That's literally telling you, we have an agenda, this is the information we want them to have, this is the information we don't want them to have. So just have a little look at history, recent history and history more broadly, to see whether or not you can trust your government to handle the information you have access to. And ask yourself again, if their interests are really about welfare, wouldn't they have a different agenda when it comes to war? Wouldn't they have a different agenda when it comes to health, the funding of education, and the availability of good food? Just a few examples to contemplate. If there is a lack of consistency, that's revealing. Here's some further thoughts on the online safety bill. The online safety bill seeks to shield internet users, especially youth, from the slingshots of malicious online content. But the bill goes beyond forcing platforms to remove illegal content. The bill is shrouded in a veil of safetyism and pays only lip service to privacy and free speech rights. The implementation sword will be wielded by Ofcom, the communications regulator, with the law setting a stringent punishment pathway for non-compliers, inclusive of colossal fines and even incarceration. This is unprecedented levels of censorship. Incarceration of publishers of information they don't disagree with. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised, because Julian Assange, a publisher of information they don't like, is already incarcerated. The bill imbues the government with tremendous power. Oh, that's good, because that's what they need, more power. They're doing so well with the power they have. The capability to demand that online services employ government-approved software to scan through user content, including photos, files and messages, to identify illegal content. Illegal for now, but potentially dissent. What is the priority of your government? Have you not noticed that official military military bodies that were used to counter terrorism are now being used to counter narratives or inconvenient narratives when it comes to the pandemic or when it comes to the war. Your freedom is becoming their problem. What it appears to me they want is to be able to completely curate and control your reality. Google already has a tremendous capacity to control the information that you see and don't see. Our conversation with Dr. Robert Epstein is very informative, and you should have a look at that conversation. It will astonish and stagger you what you will learn there. These two entities, big tech platforms and governments globally, interlocking in order to control the information sphere is something that we should resist while we still can. It's going to define the next generation. It is going to determine the outcome of elections. It is going to determine literally whether or not you and future generations of your family are free. Non-compliance can result in severe penalties, such as facing criminal charges. From a free speech and anti-censorship perspective, this legislation is fundamentally disturbing. Critics argue this bill could enhance potential censorship on the pretext of safety. How often in the last few years have you seen safety and convenience used to legitimize measures that doubtlessly offer more ability to control, whether it's passports in order to ensure health, or whether it's free speech around somewhat abstract matters like a apparently foreign war. I believe we're living in times where authoritarianism is being moved towards, usually under the auspices of safety or convenience or necessity or kindness or a response to a particular type of crisis. But once these powers are granted, they will at some point be used, and you may find yourself unpersoned, you may find yourself at odds with a state agenda, and they will have the power now to control, criminalize and incarcerate you. The bill as it stands allows the government to scan messages and photos posing significant threats to security and privacy to internet users globally. When Edward Snowden made those revelations 10, 15 years ago now, it was already staggering the capacity that governments and big tech companies had to spy on their own citizens and to determine what they deemed appropriate and inappropriate. This is now dwarfed by current capacities. We are at a point where you could live in a reality where the information you gain access to is completely and totally controlled. To a degree, we already do live in that reality, and where any possible alternative voice could be shut down for a variety of reasons, of course, beginning with entirely legitimate and reasonable causes, but ending up with simply preferences, and those preferences are always biased towards the interests of the state and the state's partners. So that's how the state can control and shut down independent media, dissidents and dissenting voices. You have to decide for yourself whether they would use that power judiciously. Do they behave in a judicious manner? Let me know in the chat and the comments. Let's have a look now at how global big tech are opposing potential competitors. There's an antitrust element to this, there's a monopolization element to this, but more important is the ability to control your own ideological, philosophical, theological, ontological space. In a significant event leading up to the Republican presidential primary debate in August, Rumble, the rising video platform, was granted exclusive rights to provide a free online broadcast. However, it became apparent that Google search had buried references to Rumble's stream of the debate, sparking concerns for proponents of free speech and critics of Google's monopoly power. When you have monopolistic power, whether it's over food or information, you can control the quality of that food or information, you can control access to that food or information, you can determine how it is used. We used to have a different understanding of this when it was in the material realm, where you could understand that the monopolization of a particular commodity was not potentially advantageous to us, the people that are going to be potentially exploited as a result of that level of control. Now, of course, there are monopolies around food actually still, and indeed, obviously, energy and the ability to engage in war, but attention, consciousness, the ability to engage sentiently with data and information, and is now able to be controlled to a degree that I don't think we're even capable of understanding, because of course the reality we live in is already curated by these interests. That's why you've got to watch our conversation with Dr. Robert Epstein, where he tells you about how he has demonstrated how this is happening and how it could be significant, and he believes it has already been significant, for example, in American presidential elections. You're going to want to watch that conversation. Let's have a look at how something more measurable and observable like Rumble's coverage of the presidential primaries was controlled and shut down. According to a report by The Intercept, prior to the debate, Google's civics and US campaigns team had expressively inquired about the RNC's live stream plans, seeking to align it with the public's search for a live event. An RNC official told Google via email that the debate would be streaming exclusively on Rumble. The August 23rd debate was broadcast on Fox News and streamed on Fox Nation, which requires a subscription, while Rumble was the only one to stream it for free. Despite providing Google with this crucial information, users searching for the debate stream on Google were ushered to links from YouTube, Fox News and various news reports instead of Rumble, causing the platform to miss out on expected traffic. There's a clear example of Google directing viewers away from from free content towards paid-for content by the legacy media. Why would they do that? This unceremonious disappearance of Rumble's link from Google search results led to an outcry from Rumble's team. Its general counsel, Michael Ellis, viewed it as an exemplification of Google's long-standing practice of suppressing competition to propagate its own platform, YouTube. He argued that this action was not merely a case of miscommunication, as Google had suggested, but egregious favoritism. Now, of course, this is already a significant piece of information. It's coverage, I suppose, of a Republican primary debate that was available for free. But for me, what's more terrifying is the possibility that reality itself is going to be controlled and curated by the interests of a big tech monopoly and the interests of the state. They are forming more and more opportunities for collaboration. You already know there are military and data contracts between Google and Microsoft and your government and my government. Now, the new bills that are being passed across the world in concord, in concert with one another, grant new powers and new abilities. Based on this evidence, how do you imagine that's going to be used? Do you think it's going to be used to encourage healthy debate, to facilitate dissenting voices, to enable different communities to have a voice, to be entitled to their own views about their own culture, about their own ideology? Or do you imagine that this might be exploited in order to absolutely shut down opposition views, to completely disappear and diminish any voices or interests that are at odds with the interests of the state and their corporate partners? Just spend a few moments thinking about the last couple of years. Just think about their actual stance on welfare of children. Just think about how they allocate your taxpayer dollars up till now. Do they facilitate foreign wars, or do they respond to domestic disasters? Use this information to conclude for yourself whether or not you want to grant them new, exclusive, and in some cases absolutely unprecedented, almost to the point that it was beyond conception, power. This incident holds significant implications for digital free speech and competition in the online sphere. It raises important questions about the role and responsibilities of dominant internet platforms in relation to smaller emerging entities. When we view this through the lens of censorship, it serves as a poignant reminder of how tech giants can shape what is accessible to users. Practices like these could lead to a monopolistic information environment where curiosity, choice, and access are limited. Already we live in this world to a point, but it's going to be exacerbated by these laws unless we oppose them, unless we facilitate measures of observing how these tech platforms behave. Again, Dr. Robert Epstein showed how they can place observers in various territories to see how Google curates information. They've already been able to influence Google's behavior. Again, watch that conversation if you can. The issue resonates loudly in a world where Google is already entangled in a pivotal antitrust case leveled by the Department of Justice, accused of undermining competition through monopolistic practices. Therefore, the handling of Rumble's broadcast rights puts a spotlight on Google's operations, raising more eyebrows about its alleged preferential measures and their implications for free speech and fair competition. Rumble is currently in discovery regarding legal action against Google, accusing the tech behemoth of anti-competitive practices. Rumble alleges that Google is unfairly promoting its own video platform, YouTube, at the expense of its competitors. The lawsuit, which has drawn significant attention in the tech and legal sector, claims that Google's algorithms unduly prioritize YouTube content in search results. Additionally, Rumble points to the pre-installation of the YouTube app on Android devices as a major competitive disadvantage for other video platforms. Perhaps you're aware that in Malaysia, many phones already come with Facebook installed, and it becomes the only portal via which people can access information. Platforms and apps that have a preference, it's obvious to see that that will control your access to information, that will control your understanding of reality, the food you eat. What do you think advertising is? Here you go, this is the type of food that you should eat. What kind of ideals do they promote? Oddly, when it comes to nutrition and food that are actually demonstrably bad for you. And yet when it comes to information, we're expected to believe that they have your and your children's best interests at heart. Since 2001, Google has given a share of its revenue to smartphone makers, Apple and Samsung, as well as to browser makers like Mozilla, to get them to set Google search as the default option on their phone handsets and web browsers. Importantly, the deals are not known to be exclusive. Another search operator could theoretically bid away the default option from Google, but the amounts involved are colossal, billions annually, with Apple being the most important. Wells Fargo estimates Google will pay the phone maker $23 billion this year for the default search position. The two companies have had a profitable, if conflicted, relationship since the advent of mobile tech in 2007, and the deal has been quite advantageous to both firms, cementing Google's search monopoly and providing Apple with a reliable cash source, plus ensuring a place for the crucial suite of Google apps, Search, Maps, Gmail, and YouTube. Look at the numbers involved in that deal. $23 billion. Look at the scale, the truly global scale of this problem. In any other sphere, at any other time, this would be illegal. The only reason it's not illegal is because Google and Apple are bigger than nations. That's part of what globalism and anti-globalism is about. Unelected, private, corporate interests having so much power that they are beyond the control of any government that would even seek to control them, a government that actually represented you. And I don't see many of those around these days. So when the government, your government or mine or any government, form deals with those organizations, can you see the degree of power that they are wielding is unimaginable. Apple and Google are already corporately and financially more powerful than most nations on earth. And the nations that are more powerful than them, because of our tax dollars, because of our endeavors, because of our shared and individual histories, those powers are doing deals with them right now to ensure that Apple and Google continue with business as usual, and the state have the new advantage of being able to spy on you and use your information and control the information that you get access to. This is what globalism truly means, that your nation doesn't belong to you. Your nation belongs to them. That all you have is empty rhetoric around freedom and liberty and justice, but you don't actually see it because it doesn't happen with you. It happens in deals between Google and Apple. It happens in deals between your government and those corporations. And the only way to oppose it is, curiously, through independent media voices and platforms that, maybe even for economic reasons, might oppose the ideology of these behemoths. This is absolutely vital. This set of new bills that seeks to shut down competition facilitates yet more power for these global giants. And these giants are making alliances, deals, and terrifyingly, laws with your nation. You know that EU laws are often constructed in collaboration with Google lawyers. This is a staggering historical moment. This is what we mean when we talk about centralized power, authoritarianism, and globalism. Power that is beyond nations, that co-opts and corrupts nations, that means that your democratic rights, your free speech, your liberty, and your freedom are little more than noises controlled by a completely immersive dome of unassailable power. Okay, that's all we can bring you on this platform for now. To see this video in its entirety, please follow us on Rumble, and if you can, support us directly. It's more meaningful and important now that you do that, if you can, if it's within your means, than ever before, as this story makes very plain and clear. See you over there. We stream every day. Until next time, stay free.